All right, so on this problem, we are looking to find the six trig ratios using exact values of the angle theta in the triangle when A is equal to 3 and B is equal to 7. So I have a triangle set up here, and you can set up any triangle as long as if you've got your angles A, B, and C, remember that your little a's will go across from your big A, your little b is across from your big B, and your little c is across from big C. So otherwise it doesn't matter how you label the triangle. So first thing that we want to find is, what do we have? Well, I know that A is equal to 3, B is equal to 7, and I want to find C. To find C, I can use the Pythagorean Theorem because I have a right triangle. If I don't have a right triangle, then I can't use that, but in a right triangle I can. Remember, that's going to be A squared plus B squared equals C squared. We know A and B, and it doesn't really matter where we place them in the fact that everything's going to be squared and added. But I have A squared, so that's going to be 3 squared. My B squared is 7 squared is equal to C squared. So 3 squared will get me 9, plus 7 squared is 49, equal to C squared. 9 plus 49 will get me 58, and then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So I end up with C is equal to the square root of 58. Now in this case, we don't do plus or minus, even though we introduced the radical, because we're talking about a distance, and distance cannot be negative. So now that I have the square root of 58, I can solve the 6 trig ratios. I can find those exact values. So the thing you have to remember is how they work. So if I'm looking at sine of theta, because we're using our angle theta here, the sine of theta is going to be equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. So in that case, our opposite of our theta is going to be 7. The hypotenuse is going to be the square root of 58. Remember, the hypotenuse is going to be across from your right angle of your triangle. We don't leave it like this. We need to rationalize the denominator, so we're going to multiply by 1, and in this case that 1 looks like our denominator over itself. So on the top we'll end up with 7 square roots of 58, and on the bottom the square root of 58 times the square root of 58 is the square root of 58 squared. Taking the square root of that, you end up with that 58. So that's the value of our sine. If we look at cosine, our cosine of theta is going to be the adjacent angle over the hypotenuse. So using our same angle of theta, the adjacent is going to be 3. So we're looking at 3 over the square root of 58, which again, we are going to multiply by that square root of 58 over the square root of 58. So we end up with 3 square roots of 58 over 58. So we've got sine and cosine. Let's go find tangent. So tangent of theta is going to be the opposite over the adjacent. Remember, your adjacent side is the one that's next to your angle. In this case, we're looking at theta, so again, it's my adjacent, and there's my opposite. If I was looking at angle A, this becomes my adjacent, and this becomes my opposite. So pay attention to which angle you're looking at to who's the opposite and the adjacent sides. Hypotenuse will always be the same across from the right angle. So our opposite side is 7, and our adjacent is 3. If we look and find our other 3 trig ratios, the one that goes with sine is going to be cosecant theta. Remember, everybody gets a co in their partnership, so we have sine and cosecant, and cosine and secant, and tangent and cotangent. So cosecant is going to be the hypotenuse over the opposite because it's the reciprocal identity. So our hypotenuse is the square root of 58, and our opposite is 7. And we don't have to rationalize that one, so that's awesome. All right, so for cosine, we have secant theta, which is going to be the hypotenuse over the adjacent. So that's going to be the square root of 58 over 3, because that's our adjacent side to our theta. We have one more trig function, or trig ratio to find, and that will be cotangent of theta, and it will be the adjacent over the opposite. So that's going to be equal to 3/7. So you need to know these ratios. You can remember it through SOHCAHTOA. Remember, SOHCAHTOA is going to be SOH for saw. That's sine is opposite over hypotenuse. COA is going to be, or cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and TOA is opposite over adjacent, so SOHCAHTOA. So you can remember how those work and use those.